President Biden is closing out a week-long trip to Europe, where NATO cleared the path for its future member, Sweden, and vowed to embrace Ukraine when conditions are right. He spent the day in Helsinki with the leaders of Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, celebrating the newest member, Finland. A strong display of unity for the alliance as Ukraine continues its counteroffensive against Russia's invasion. Biden's trip demonstrates the strength and endurance of the international coalition against a weakened Russia, just weeks after an attempted mutiny by the Wagner Group.
At this critical moment in history, this inflection point, the world is watching to see, will we do the hard work that matters to forge a better future? Will we stand together? Will we stand with one another? Will we stay committed to our course? This week, Finland, the United States, and our allies and partners said a resounding, loud yes. Yes, we'll step up. Yes, we'll stand together. And yes, we'll keep working toward a stronger, safer, and more secure world.
Biden's visit was a dramatic about-face for the United States. His predecessor was openly hostile to the NATO alliance and its members. In what looks like low-key shade, the Biden administration held today's events in Helsinki almost 5 years to the day after Trump stood side by side with Putin in that same city and told reporters he trusted the former KGB agent more than America's intelligence agencies.
They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
The former president, who likes to say the world is laughing at Biden, was technically the only president of the United States to be laughed at by the almost 200 members of the United Nations at the General Assembly.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Well, it's fair to say Biden is having a strong week. He's expanded NATO, embarrassed Putin, and overseen a significant drop in inflation, which could explain why MAGA Republicans are losing their marbles over in the House. Last night, House Republicans loaded up the National Defense Authorization Act, which funds the Pentagon, with a string of poison pill amendments that would end the Pentagon policy of reimbursing expenses for travel to obtain an abortion, prohibit the Department of Defense from providing gender-affirming care, and gut diversity and inclusion programs. Oh, and that's not all. Marjorie Taylor Greene, following the lead of her colleagues who want to defund the federal police, a.k.a. the FBI, well, she tried to insert an amendment that would strike $300 million in funding for Ukraine. But that was a bridge too far for the rest of her caucus and didn't make it into the final version. However, the remaining demands endanger the passage of what is typically a bipartisan bill and faces a daunting path forward in the United States Senate. Joining me now is retired Admiral James Stavridis, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and MSNBC Chief International Analyst, and David Jolly, MSNBC political analyst and former Republican congressman who is no longer affiliated with the party. Thank you both for being here. And Admiral Stavridis, I do have to ask you just for a general comment on the difference in tone and stature for the United States and dignity for the United States in having a president like Joe Biden, who is an international, sort of a proud member of the international community and doesn't, suck up to Putin in Helsinki and what we used to have.
Yeah, every time I see that footage from Helsinki, I find it incredibly unbelievable that an American president would stand there and do that. Yeah. And, I've known President Biden a long time. When he was vice president, he visited many times to NATO. I've watched him sit at the dinner table at the ambassador's house and literally walk around and discuss every member of the alliance in detail. Boy, does he understand the world and what a difference it makes. We ought to really celebrate this moment, Joy, for the alliance, and in particular, the accession of Sweden and Finland. These are two incredibly capable turnkey militaries. Sweden at one point provided my personal protection in Afghanistan, their special forces, their fighters aircraft are incredible. The Finns have more combat capability on the ground than almost any nation in Europe. You know, that distant boom you hear is Vladimir Putin's head exploding at frustration with the upcheck of the alliance led by President Biden.
Yeah, and I think the other boom that you might hear, the sort of echoing boom, David Jolly, might be the Republicans' heads exploding because they actually, I think it's almost as embarrassing that the United States Congress took a vote on whether to defund our ally that is being invaded by Russia. They literally, the fact that, you know, Kevin McCarthy had to let them take that vote, I think is also quite humiliating. Your thoughts?
Yeah, but that's expecting a party that has no shame to be capable of feeling embarrassment.
Fair.
And I think that's how Donald Trump has kind of reshaped the Republican Party. The Admiral's exactly right. Joe Biden restored leadership on the world stage, restored diplomatic leadership. And if there is a domestic political contrast to be drawn, it is how Donald Trump led himself and reshaped the party, someone who is transactional by nature. So if Vladimir Putin's the highest bidder, he's going to work with Putin over our Alliance for Freedom in NATO, and also somebody with the vanity and narcissism that we watch. So if nearly a century of history has suggested that NATO is our strongest way of protecting freedom in the West, that wasn't Donald Trump's idea. So he doesn't like it. And what happened is that immaturity of leadership has infected the entire Republican Party. And you see it in these amendments on the floor of the House right now, trying to defund our support of Ukraine.
Yeah. And Admiral, I'm going to play for you Joe Biden, President Biden's response, because you, as somebody who is a leader of NATO and obviously as an admiral, a leader within the United States Navy, I wonder how it strikes you that the leadership of the United States Marines is being held hostage by one senator. And he is no veteran. He has no military experience whatsoever, has not served the country in that way. Yet he still feels that because he's opposed to abortion, he can do this. Here's what President Biden had to say about Tommy Tuberville.
He's jeopardizing U.S. security by what he's doing. I expect the Republican Party to stand up and do something about it. The idea that we're injecting into fundamental foreign policy decisions what, in fact, as a domestic social debate on social issues is bizarre. I don't ever recall that happening, ever. And it's just totally irresponsible in my view.
Admiral, I'll just let you add your thoughts.
The president obviously is exactly right. And, you know, Coach Tuberville, you know, is a football coach. He ought to understand that teams need leaders, and you can't just rip out the coaches. And that's what's happening. We're going to have a U.S. Marine Corps, arguably our most elite fighting force, without a commandant for the first time in 150 years. You think Coach Tuberville would send his football team out onto the gridiron? And here's a news flash. Our national security is not a game. We got to get past this, through it, over it, whatever it takes. But I yield to the distinguished congressman from Florida to tell me how to get the Republicans to take this on, please.
Well, I hate to say it, but he kind of did. I mean, he kind of did ditch his college football team to go to Alabama and left them in the lurch. So maybe he feels like that is a history he just would like to repeat with the entire Marine Corps. Let me throw it over to you. I mean, he did.